Hello YouTube, it's Ryan here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we're talking about the Wheel of Time TV show, episode 1. And man, what a exciting time to live in that we have this super awesome TV show for a series that's super cool. This is kind of very meaningful to me because when I first started my channel way back in February or March of 2020, which is like almost 2 years ago, holy crap. This is one of the first things that I wanted to do on the channel. I had started to hear about the show kind of being in production around that time, and I had started, being a fan of the series at that time. I think at that time I was starting to read the third book in the series for the first time, or had just finished it. I can't remember exactly, but man, what an exciting time to be alive, man. I really am happy to be here and happy to talk about the show. And it's so meaningful, like I said, because this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So yeah, if you guys are interested in reading or watching reviews I have for the books themselves, I have a playlist somewhere up there. And I've had 3 books to read, and I've had discussions on each of the books. So I have over 7 videos to watch if you guys are interested in seeing how I go through the Wheel of Time. I also had a reaction to one of the trailers. So if you're interested in that, please do check it out. It's on my channel. So yeah, let's get into episode 1. I'm gonna try to not make it last a long time because I have a lot of notes, 3 pages of notes, but I don't really want to talk about everything point by point. I'm not really interested in talking about every scene, but I do want to talk about some of the more important things in the characterization that I found to be kind of interesting for the characters. So let's get into it. Episode 1 is called Leavetaking, which is, the first half of the year, the first major plot point in the Eye of the World. It's, the prologue is the breaking, and then the first part of the story is Tam and Rand going to Emond's Field, Beltane, then Winter's Night, and then it all goes to hell, right? And so we kind of cover all of that ground here in this episode, but there's a few major changes early on. So first of all, the episode starts with Moraine talking about the breaking, but we don't get to see the breaking happening, which I think is a little bit disappointing. I understand why they did it, and kind of doesn't make sense without context to kind of have the prologue, and that's not necessarily possible in a TV show where you're trying to grip people's interest. And if you did the breaking and then you kind of switched over to Tam and Rand, you might have a loss of interest because you're kind of promising one thing and then switching over to something else. And it's kind of boring in comparison. So I understand why they did that and why they chose to have Moraine changing as she talked about the breaking. I thought it was interesting. We also see her putting away her Angreol, I think, the little blue man. I think that's what it was called. I can't remember, but I thought it was really cool. I like the costuming. I think she looks really badass. And then we get another scene where some men are running, and the Red Ajah are chasing them. Again, this doesn't happen in the books, but I think it's actually meaningful, and I think this actually might be happening in the prequel book. I can't remember. I think it's called New Spring. I haven't read it yet because I haven't gotten to the point where people recommend that you read it. Although that is the first Wheel of Time book that I purchased when I started trying to get into the series. But I sold it off because I was like, I'm not going to read this anytime soon. And I think this scene is interesting because it develops a little bit of the kind of situation going on. And it actually paints Moraine in a more negative light because we get to see people that are dressed like her, but in a different color, do something that is more or less considered bad and kind of comes off as a very kind of shitty person. She kind of reminds me of a Sith. I don't know why. I think the red coloring and the kind of cocky personality of Leandrin is kind of interesting. And we get to see her use magic, but no weaves, and we actually get to see this pretty often until the end of Winter's Night, which I thought was pretty interesting and kind of builds of suspense to how that works. And if I guess you can tell that it's because people that are watching her are not able to see the weaves, but I guess it doesn't really make sense because everyone that was watching Leandrin use the weaves was able to channel. So maybe it's just in order to build up suspense for the watcher, right? So yeah, the other important thing that happens here is that we get to see that Moraine is watching Leandrin do this, and Lan and Moraine are talking about how this isn't the person that they're looking for, the Dragon Reborn, right? And they talk about the 2 rivers, which is, where everyone is from, and they talk about 4 taverns. So this is a different kind of change. If I remember correctly, in the books, there's only 3 tavern, and Nynaeve and Egwene are kind of like embroiled in all of this, but they're not tavern themselves. So there's a slight change there. I think it makes sense. It doesn't really affect the story all that much because at the end of the day, Nynaeve and Egwene are always in the thick of it. So having one of them also be part of the person that affects the wheel, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So I think this change is understandable and kind of elevates the importance of Egwene a bit and kind of makes her match the boys, which is kind of something that Egwene didn't really end up doing very much throughout the first 3 books. So I think that's pretty good, a pretty kind of interesting change. And then we get the women's circle ceremony. So this is kind of interesting because this is not in the books at all. This is not a thing that happened. And it's also kind of interesting because it might have been something that does happen in the books, but it's never mentioned, at least so far that I've read, because Egwene wasn't actually old enough in the books to be part of the women's circle, right? So she was 17 years old, so she was just about to be a grown woman. It's kind of interesting. And it also kind of has like a little bit of a bit of exposition there. It kind of explains why Nynaeve would tug her braid all the time, because that's kind of a thing that Nynaeve does. But the way that they're talking about the braid and how it signifies that she's alone but never alone, and how even Nynaeve tells Egwene, hey, if you're ever feeling bad or down, touch your braid and remember that you're one of us, that you remember that you have people that care about you. So it makes sense that Nynaeve would tug her braid in stressful situations if something like this happened in the books, right? So it kind of is interesting and kind of retroactively explains why Nynaeve would be like yanking on her hair all the time. So I thought that was fun. And then we finally get around to this whole situation with Rand and Tom and Tam, and all of this stuff, right? And they finally arrive on the 2 rivers, and there's some gossip about the war. I really enjoyed the scene where the boys are just sitting around, and I actually really like the actor that plays Rand, because the way when he smiles really big, he looks really goofy, and he looks like pretty young, and I like that because it kind of matches the tone of who Rand is at this moment in time. So I think that's cool, and I like the relationship between the 3 guys. Matt is kind of a more worldly in like a less good way, whereas Rand isn't really. He's a very kind of standard farm boy, and then Perrin is somewhere in between. And I actually really like their dynamic there. I think it's a little bit different from the books. In the books, I think that all 3 of them are more or less the same, but of course they have kind of different outlooks based on their situation. So overall I think that so far the series is so good and really, really good, at kind of showing you a lot of information without it being so kind of in your face, I guess. And then we finally get to the kind of important thing here is when Lan and shows up, and Nynaeve kind of stands up and he's like, who the fuck are you? Why are you here? And Aes Sedai. And here's a major change that I noticed. Everyone knows that Moraine is an Aes Sedai immediately. They see her ring and they're like, oh, Aes Sedai. But if I remember correctly in the books, it wasn't revealed that she was an Aes Sedai until the end of Winter's Night, when she killed all the Trollocs so people wouldn't die, right? So I'm curious why they made that change. I don't really see a reason for it, although I guess there really isn't any reason not to do it, and it kind of does simplify the story a bit. It makes it less behind closed doors, and kind of pushes the plot along faster. So I understand why this happens, right? The other kind of interesting changes here happen to Perrin and Matt, where Perrin gets a wife, and I really understand what her point is. Like, she doesn't go to Egwene's ceremony, she doesn't go to the party, she is like working in the forge, and I don't understand what that's supposed to signify. There's this whole scene where Perrin kind of hugs her from behind and touches her stomach, which I guess it means that she's pregnant, or she wants to have kids but can't or something like that, and that's why she's kind of away from everyone because she's kind of ashamed of herself or something like that because of her kind of medieval understanding of like, oh, it's her fault, but it's not really. It's just kind of a thing that happens to some people. And I didn't really understand, but I think that her existing is an interesting way to develop Perrin's character without having to be in his head, right? Because Perrin's character is kind of really complex, and it's not easy to understand without all of the internal monologue. But if you give him an external reason why he is the way he is, I think it works well. It's kind of shitty because they end up fridging Lila, but I mean, she's not a real character in the canon of the books, and at the end of the day, some characters just have to exist in order to die, so it's not really that big of a deal. So, but I thought it was interesting. The other thing is with Matt. Matt also has a kind of interesting personality, kind of different from Rand and Perrin, and he's a little bit more kind of like willing to do shitty things, but we don't really ever understand why. I think he just like is a troublemaker, kind of just has fun. But in the TV show, they make Matt have crappy parents. His dad is a womanizer. His mom is like just an angry kind of old lady. And he has two little sisters that he has to take care of. And he has to make do with what he can. So he's a pickpocket. He gambles a lot and stuff like that. And it's kind of an interesting way of also making that work relatively easy. Kind of simplify the character development in order to make it more streamlined. And I think that's actually good. I think that some people might be angry about the situation, but I think it's good. It works well. And of course, it actually allows everyone to understand the characters much faster. And, you can still flesh them out later and kind of explain more in depth. But you still need like an initial interaction that shows you what type of person they are, right? And it's easier this way in television than it is in like a book where you can take, 5-6 chapters of just listening to the character think in order to understand them, right? There's also this slight change with Rand and Egwene's relationship, which I think is interesting. It seems to be a more adult relationship for them. So it's kind of interesting because Egwene is clearly 20 years old, thanks to some information that is given to us later with Egwene and Moraine, Nynaeve and Moraine, where it basically seems like the women's circle ceremony is when you turn 20. So Moraine figures out that Nynaeve is 26 and Egwene is 20. Logically, if you're following the age difference in the books, the boys should also be around 20 because I'm using Nynaeve as a difference in age, right? Nynaeve is about 25 in the books, and the boys are about 19, 20, and Egwene is 17. But if they age up Egwene to 20, I don't see why they would age up the boys, right? And it kind of makes more sense to have them together because, if Egwene and Rand are having this physical relationship and having this kind of discussion about what they're going to do with their lives, it makes sense that they would be about the same age. So I think that was an interesting change. Doesn't really affect the characters all that much, so it really isn't a bad one. And yeah, nothing too bad there. I liked it, that it worked. Moraine and Lan have a bath scene together. I didn't really understand what the purpose of it was. It was to show that Moraine can use weaves pretty easily in any situation, but it also is supposed to kind of hint at their relationship, but it's so awkward. It doesn't give the right impression. I don't know. It's kind of weird. I didn't really understand that one, but it's whatever, I guess. I don't really find it bad. I just didn't understand. I was like, are they just copying The Witcher right now? Like, what's going on? So if anyone understands, let me know down in the comments. And yeah, Rand and Egwene have this fight because Egwene wants to be the wisdom. I don't remember this plot point being a problem in the first book, but I guess because Nynaeve never had this problem of like, I can't be with Lan because I'm a wisdom, right? So I guess that was manufactured tension in the books or in the show in order to kind of develop their relationship faster and kind of spread them away from each other without having to have this whole situation that happens in the books, right? So interesting there. Don't really hate it, don't really like it. I just think it's a change that has to happen in order to streamline the book. or the series, and that's just kind of how it is for a lot of these, right? And then what happens? Okay, now we get to start to Winter Night, right? So Trollocs attack Rand and Tam when they're home, and this scene changes again because what happens here is that Tam pulls out his sword, Tam pulls out his sword, and he actually attacks the Trolloc, which I guess in this case would be Narg, but he doesn't speak, so he's not really intelligent like in the books. And Rand doesn't really have a revelation of sorts. They kind of skip all of that situation there where Rand isn't from Emond's Field, and I guess this is in order to maintain the illusion that any of the four of them could be the Dragon Reborn. So I'm curious to see how that kind of works, but I think that that's a very strong character moment for Rand, and the fact that it doesn't happen is kind of not the best, but I mean, it's whatever. I don't really care too much with that there. They also skip the trek to the village where Rand is going crazy trying to get his dad to Moraine, and I don't know. I was actually kind of excited to see that scene just because I wanted to see, Rand just going insane trying to get his dad to safety. But overall, it's okay. Let's see. Then Moraine shows up and kind of does this whole weaving sequence where she looks like she's firebending and airbending. And I actually really like how it looks. I think the bright white light is really interesting. And I wish there were different colors so to represent the different types of weaving that's happening, or like the different aspects of the one power that they are using, but it doesn't really matter. She makes a fireball and she shoots it at people, and then she uses wind to push these rocks to attack some Trollocs. Thought it was really interesting. I like the way they choreographed it. I'm curious to see if everyone's going to have a similar kind of like Tai Chi approach to weaving, or if it's going to be different per person. So I'm curious to see how that works. And then the kind of Trollocs attack in force, and they go into everywhere. And one situation that happens is that they go into the forge where Lila and Perrin are there, and they kind of fight the Trolloc. And then Moraine is doing this like spirit bomb thing where she's like gathering energy, and she gets lightning, and it was so badass. I thought it was super cool. Nynaeve is taken by a Trolloc, and then in the midst of bloodlust, Perrin actually ends up killing Lila. And this is the major kind of shift, because this is what is kind of happening in order to explain the way Perrin is in the books, right? In the books, Perrin is this very kind of gentle giant kind of guy. He's afraid of his size. He's afraid of his strength. He doesn't really want to do anything that might hurt anyone. And he doesn't really have an explanation for this early on. It doesn't really happen until after the wolves, and he meets them and kind of realizes that, hey man, he is a power of nature. He is a man that is so powerful and so strong and has these kind of like animalistic urges that it maybe is a bad idea for him to fight, right? And this kind of compounds with his natural gentle giantness. But added into that, it kind of takes a long time to discover this, because 3 books is a lot of writing, and so they had to simplify that, right? So how do you get the same effect, the same idea that he doesn't want to hurt anyone, and doesn't want to give into bloodlust, without having to develop, pages and pages and minutes and minutes and minutes of inner dialogue? You have him develop a situation where he ends up hurting someone he cares about, and so now he's afraid of his strength, right? So there you go. That's why Lila exists. That's why she dies. And I think it's actually a really good way of doing it. So there you go. I thought it was really good. I really, really liked it because it was such an emotional scene. It actually made sense. Even if you don't really know Perrin and Lila, you understand the difficulty and the emotion that is happening in there, even if you don't necessarily have, a wife, right? Like, you understand, damn, he just killed the most important person in his life. How the fuck does that feel? How is he, gonna get past this, right? So I thought it was really powerful, really interesting, really well done there. Moraine gets hurt, and she manages to, attack the Trollocs again. And then Winter Night ends. Rand finally arrives. There's no Nynaeve, and Perrin is seen carrying Lila to the other dead. And Moraine heals Tam, no problem. It was actually really easy. There wasn't this kind of difficulty where Rand isn't sure he wants her to heal him, and Tam doesn't really look like he's dying or anything. He just kind of like has a big scratch on his shoulder. That's basically all there is to it. I think they kind of really downplayed that aspect, but they kind of replaced it with Nynaeve being taken, so I guess that kind of makes sense. And Rand tries to confront Moraine, and then they have the whole exposition there where she's like, no, all of you have to leave. The Trollocs are here for you guys. If you guys don't leave, everyone in Emond's Field dies. Let's get a move on, right? And finally, Leavetaking. There you go. And it's kind of interesting because that's kind of where it ends, right? And generally, I thought it was really great. It actually ends with Moraine having the little speech that is like, you know, there is no beginning, there is no end, the wheel of time turns and turns again and stuff like that, which is at the beginning of every book. And I thought that was awesome. I really love that a lot. I thought it was really well done. And yeah, I think that's it. Let me see if there's any other bits that I missed in terms of characterization. No, I think everything else that we talked about was kind of okay. I have, like, my middle page of notes has a lot of stuff that is connective tissue and kind of just like situations where like Lan finds the dragon fang out of goats, and Nynaeve and Moraine talk in the Woman's Circle cave and stuff like that. Really isn't all that big of a deal. And then Rand and Egwene have this like fight where Rand is basically guilting Egwene and telling her he feels betrayed, and Egwene and him, you know, knowing that she's got to be a wisdom, so whatever, like they have this moment of sadness there. And generally, I think that's basically it. And overall, I am really, really happy with how this works. I think it's really awesome. Yeah. So let me think if I have anything else to say. Overall, I thought this was a wonderful episode. I thought it was really well done. There were some kind of moments where I felt the acting was a little off. Not necessarily bad, just like someone was overacting and someone was underacting. And so there was this kind of like dissonance in the acting of the characters. And I think this was mostly in the scenes where it was just Moraine and Lan. But I guess that kind of actually fits the way their characters are. Lan literally is like a rock, right? This man does not talk, does not do anything except, you know, react when Moraine is in trouble, right? So it kind of makes sense that he would be kind of off-putting, not really like a sure presence, like an understandable kind of like normal character. And Moraine being so kind of like flighty and kind of like cagey and not really telling you anything, really coy, it makes sense that she would feel overacted and him feel underacted. So I kind of understand where that's coming from, but I just thought there was some situations where it just felt kind of weird, right? When Meryn reacts to Moraine walking in, there's this kind of weird, like, what are we supposed to do here kind of feel, which, again, feels off, but it also completely fits the scene. So I don't know if I'm, like, reading too much into these feelings or what, but I definitely felt that there was some kind of oddities in the way that acting was happening, right? Other than that, I thought the CGI was good. I thought the practical effects for the Trollocs was amazing, and I actually really like how the Myrddraal or the Fade looks. I think he looks really badass. Yeah, other than that, I definitely recommend you guys check out the X-ray content. If you're watching on the computer, I don't think it works on like a Roku or a Fire Stick, but if you're watching on your computer, pause the video when it's starting, and then you have like an option up here somewhere that says X-ray, like when you're on Amazon Prime. And if you click on it, this like bunch of other videos show up, right? And I definitely recommend you watch The Breaking of the World. That one gives you a bunch of background information that if you're a new fan of the series or are interested in the series but don't know the context from the books, it might actually help you out quite a bit. Also, if you're a fan of the series and you're interested to hear, you know, about the production of it, there's 2 different episodes. They're about 4 minutes long each, that talk about stuff. I really enjoyed the one where Brandon Sanderson kind of talks about his relationship with Robert Jordan and the fact that he actually never met him. I thought that was really good. I really liked that episode too because Robert Jordan's wife was in it, and I had never seen her. I had never heard anything about her, but I really appreciated how she kind of talked about the relationship she had with Robert Jordan. I thought it was really, really interesting. The one where they talk about how they built up the Trollocs and stuff like that was interesting from a like, oh, that's how they did it perspective. But given that I'm not really a big fan of how they do practical effects, I just like how they look. I didn't find that one as interesting, but I thought it was cool anyways. So definitely recommend you guys check that out because it is really interesting and it adds a lot of information to the experience. So yeah, I don't know when we'll make the video for the next one, but I do want to make it soon. I probably won't get past the 3rd episode for these types of videos before I take my break for the winter, for the holidays. But I'll start back up in January and try to finish through all of them. I'm kind of sad that I didn't manage to plan this out better because I had been planning this and kind of looking forward to this for 2 years. But it just happened that like I didn't get to do what I was planning to do, so everything's kind of like up in the air. I don't know when I'm gonna get around to finishing this series, but I definitely want to do it as soon as possible, and I definitely want to get around to making more videos about it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you guys think about all the changes that have been done to the TV show, and let me know if you like them or hate them, or if you're kind of ambivalent and you understand that, hey, it's just because it's a different medium, right? So yeah, let me know down below. And again, thank you guys very much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and see you guys later.